This is an absolute pleasure to come up and introduce our next inductee, Mr. John Davidson. John, I really appreciate what Varouj said in his acceptance speech. John was an incredible athletic director, and he was an incredible athletic director at a time when Dawson, didn't have one campus, and students were all over the place, and there was a lot of dynamics that went on with that kind of stuff. But he gave so much to the college, and really did develop the programs that exist today, many of them. And so we're not here to speak about his being a great athletic director. I'm sure if you want to speak to him about that later, he'd be happy to engage you in that conversation. We're here to talk about the CCAA. And when I came in 4 years ago, I didn't have a whole lot of knowledge about how the leagues worked. I reached out to a number of people who I had great respect for, one of them being Glenn Ryder, who met me in his neighborhood in Hudson and took me to lunch and sat with me for 2 hours and spoke to me about this great organization, CCAA, and spoke to me about the RSEQ and the importance of our provincial play, our regional play, and of course national play for Division I players. The next person I spoke to was John Davidson, and John again spoke so highly of this organization. And it's fitting that both of them are going to be inducted as builders because they care so much for this organization, and they care for so many of the people in this room. John and Glenn both spoke to me about many of the people who I've met here, and whenever I had questions, they would direct me to the right people within the CCAA to get those answers. And so to have people like that building this CCAA, very fortunate, and John Dawson was very fortunate, and the CCAA was very fortunate to have you there. And so I introduce to you the next inductee in the builders category, Mr. John Davidson.
I thought I might have to remind everybody how wonderful I was, but I think that's been covered. So I'd like to thank all the Dawson crew for coming and supporting the 4 Dawson nominees and inductees, and congratulate all the inductees. I wasn't going to, but Mary reminded me that I should. The one person I really would like to congratulate would be Mary, my wife, who is retiring next week. That is not why I'd like to congratulate her. I'd like, for those who know me, I think the congratulations speaks volumes. I got involved in 1981. I was a former computer science teacher and coordinator of student affairs at a campus, and Dawson asked me to be the athletics director, which in a nutshell kind of lets you know how Dawson operates. Soon after, I end up at the CCAA meetings. Yves Paquette recruited us all, and because we were hosting, Vanier Dawson and John Abbott were hosting the Nationals, we became the reps for that year. Slow forward to 2006 when I retired, I was still the rep. And I had to think about why did I do that. It's the people. It's the people and the commitment everybody talked about tonight over all those years. And it was interesting because across Canada, there's very many different needs, and the conferences are different. I'll tell a few stories which leads up to what I'm talking about. One of my first years, I remember rooming with somebody, and I was very responsible. We were younger, so I wheeled into the hotel room in the bed about 3 o'clock in the morning and fell asleep immediately. And then I won't mention who was rooming with me, and they came in, and I overheard them asking for a wake-up call at 7:30. And the person on the other line said, "Sir, it's 7:15. This is your wake-up call." As the years went on, we slowed down a bit, but I remember that we made a big recovery when you're in Halifax, when they had a pub crawl. We all had to wear yellow hats, and if we took off the yellow hat, they asked us to kiss a fish. We ended up in a bar called the Lower Deck, where Linda paid the ugliest, meanest person in the room $10 to try to pick me up. Everybody else in the CCA was aware of this. I wasn't. I was afraid. The only redeeming thing was next day Linda had to go to every bar in the Halifax trying to find her jacket. But there's many stories like that, and I say this because you don't get to meet friends in meetings. We got to meet the friends in the activities we did afterwards, the East-West baseball games and all that, and I think that's where you understood the quality and the commitment of the people across Canada. So we went to the meetings, and God, my knees are shaking. That's odd. We went to the meetings, and I think after doing these activities with people, you understand that no matter how different it was, for instance, the Maritimes wanted eligibility to 40 years old and things like this, and in Quebec, everybody were children, so, but you understood by doing these events and getting to know the people that they had the same interests as you did at heart, and that was for the student athletes. And I think it was all those activities that brought us together, and that's why we arrived where we are today. I think it helped actually in Quebec too, because, I mean, there's Dean, Linda, Alex at one time, Glenn, a few others, and because of our friendships that happened there, when we had problems in Quebec, we never phoned the league. We phoned each other. And I think that was very important. Like, we solved the problems, because all our coaches, so you know how coaches can be sometimes, players, that we solved the problems. And it's because of the friendships that we garnered in the CCAA. I can't read my own writing. I want to thank all the coaches. I want to thank all the Dawson people who showed up to honor the Dawson people and everybody else that are getting inducted. I think the most important thing is a story I can tell is that it's the beginning of the year and all the students are trying out. And invariably a young woman would come in your office, because men are full of bravado and full of bravado, and the young woman would say something to the effect that, well, when are the tryouts? And you'd tell them, and they'd say, well, I don't think I'm going to try out because I'm not good enough. And I would say to them, well, if you don't try out, are you going to make the team? And they'd say no. I said, well, why don't you try out? Because then you have a chance and you can't be off any worse. A week or two later, you find out they're a Dawson Blue or a Vanier Cheetah or a Mount St. Vincent Mystic or whatever, and they were so proud to be on that team. And I think how honored and lucky to have a career, Gino, I understand how you feel, how honored and lucky to have a career where maybe in some small way you get to help these student athletes. That you work 6 days a week for 25 years, worth every minute of it. Because maybe in some way you changed their life when they played on a team or on a radio station or whatever activity they chose in that college, they were better for it. And so I'm very honored to get this, and thank you very much.